Welcome, participants. It's 3:59. We'll get started here in about 1 minute. All right, it's 4 o'clock. Welcome. My name is Adam Caxtetter. I'm a program manager for Crow Canyon's Cultural Explorations Department, and I have the privilege of designing and leading the logistics for Crow Canyon travel seminars. I go to work with, or I get to work with some of the most amazing people as we bring Crow Canyon's mission on the road. I have many lifelong friends that I've met through our programs, and I love the people and the mission of Crow Canyon and the good work we all do together. Thanks for tuning in and being a part of what we do. Today, we have a very special webinar called Glen Canyon Rising, featuring a film by our colleague Laura Brown and produced in collaboration with Lyle Balenquah and Craig Childs. The short film and webinar you are about to enjoy was inspired by a 2024 Cultural Explorations travel seminar by the same name. Crow Canyon is a nonprofit research and education center located in Southwest Colorado. We have programs for people, we have programs for people of all ages who like to learn. Find out more on our website at crowcanyon.org. If you have questions that arise at any point, click the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen and type your questions there. We have over 700 people, I think 780 people attending today, and we'll do our best to make time for your questions. We're not streaming on Facebook Live, but this whole presentation and just the film itself will be available on our YouTube channel very soon. In regards to our YouTube channel, please like and subscribe to our channel. It helps us reach a broader audience. Excuse me. Crow Canyon Archaeological Center acknowledges the Pueblo, Ute, Paiute, Diné, and Jicarilla Apache people on whose traditional homelands our campus sits. With the work we are doing at Crow Canyon, we seek to bring light into the darkness of memory that these lands, waters, wildlife, and her descendants hold as a result of policies of removal, genocide, and displacement. We seek paths that support and align with Indigenous people and communities. With gratitude, we honor the contributions of present-day Indigenous communities, descendants, and colleagues with whom we partner, who have helped guide our work and our mission. So I'm going to be quiet for about 10 seconds to give us a little bit of space to feel gratitude and perhaps think about the ways in which we're grateful for Indigenous people and Indigenous culture. It's not enough time, but thank you. I want to mention our beloved sister, Taylor Hasbrook, whom we miss very much. Taylor did a phenomenal job in making our webinar series what it is today, and we're forever grateful for her work and her legacy. Ben Strickland is now responsible to our webinar series and is doing an excellent job with all the details and logistics. Thanks for stepping up, Ben. Putting these webinars together and making them seem easy is a lot of work. And Crow Canyon is proud to make these webinars accessible to all, free of charge. And if you're inspired to support our work financially, we really appreciate it. Your donations are important to our work in the world, and we want to continue to serve humanity through our mission into the foreseeable future. Thanks for considering donating to Crow Canyon. We've provided a QR code, and if you go through the motions like you're going to take a picture of the screen, that QR code at the bottom, and instead of pressing the button to create a picture, look for a little internet link option that pops up when you go to take a picture, and press that button instead. Your browser will bring you just to the right page. The Greenleaf Family Foundation has generously offered to match your donations up to $50,000, and we're almost there. We ask for your help to get us across the finish line for our spring appeal. Thank you to the Greenleaf Family Foundation, and thank you to all of our donors who make our work possible. Next Thursday, July 24th, Max Early will present on his book of poetry called Ears of Corn, Listen. The following Thursday, July 31st, there will be no webinar. Then on August 7th, Autumn Gillard will present Nulu Astronomy Views. I've had the honor of traveling with Autumn together on this Green River trip this spring. She's an excellent teacher, holds great knowledge about many different things, and she's a really neat human. When she talks, I listen. Thanks for doing these webinars for us, Autumn and Max. We appreciate you. We still have space available on this year's Glen Canyon trip. So if you're inspired by what you've seen here today, know that you can see and hear a similar experience for yourself this September with Lyle and Sharisa Mijissipi Wilson, who is co-chair of the Bears Ears Intertribal Coalition. And Sharisa also did an excellent webinar for us a year ago last week. This will be a unique and unforgettable experience learning about Glen Canyon and the landscapes that surround it, like Grand Staircase Escalante, the Henry Mountains, and Capitol Reef National Park. You can follow that QR code to find out more on our website, or go to our website and click on Programs, then the Cultural Explorations tab. We also have space available on 2 more exciting travel seminars. We have a 3-day Indigenous workshop this August, led by Ade Briones, Mary Wiaki, and Reina Bontia. We also have an autumn themed trip in Southern Arizona in early November, led by Giselle Ramon Sabaron, Karen Scholmeyer, and Steve Copeland. So we're about to start the film, but before, I want to say a few nice words about our friends. Lyle and Craig are with us, and they'll share some more insights after the film. I've had the privilege of traveling with Lyle Balenquah for many years now through cultural explorations programs. And I love learning about how he sees the world. He does a phenomenal job of sharing his perspective as a Hopi, as an archaeologist, an experienced guide, an educator, as an artist, a stonemason, and so much more. His interesting accounts of the world keeps us thinking. Thank you, Lyle. Lyle has a gift of meaningful connection and finds memorable ways to enrich the experiences of others and is ever in service to his communities. Lyle is also a gifted writer, and you can learn more about his work and his perspective on his blog, Paaqavi.com. So that's Paatuui, Paaqavi.com. He also has a link where you can buy cool shirts and stickers with his original designs, like this one. Thanks, Lyle. I love this shirt, man. This is Crow Mother. And about Craig, if you haven't read all of Craig Child's books, you're missing out. Craig has a wonderful way of writing that invites you into an accurate telling of a story from his worldview, and then makes space for you to decide for yourself the moral implications of what you choose to believe and practice. If you know him and have traveled with him, you know he comes about his talents honestly. I've had the privilege of spending many a night under the stars traveling with Craig, and look forward to many more. As mighty as the pen or pencil he wields is, Craig is a kind, humble, and thoughtful human. His new book, The Wild Dark, is available now. and you are invited to purchase a copy from your local independent bookstore. And now we get to enjoy the film. So let me switch my screen shares here. Enjoy.
Lake Powell is not a lake, it's a reservoir. This is a point that was driven home for me by the late Katie Lee. I was visiting at her house years ago and I said Lake Powell, and she went straight to the dictionary and opened it and showed me that a lake is a natural feature, whereas a reservoir is something that is human-made, is made out of concrete. Below the surface of Lake Powell, hundreds of feet down, lies a canyon system like none other. It was described on the first U.S. Geological Survey expedition in 1869 by trip leader John Wesley Powell, who wrote, "So we have a curious ensemble of wonderful features, carved walls, royal arches, glens, alcove gulches, mounds, and monuments. From which of these features shall we select a name? We decide to call it Glen Canyon."
As a young person, I would sometimes travel to the reservoir with my dad and other family so that we could fish and swim in the cold waters during the hot summer months. Many times, we would not travel via the paved highways, but rather, we would take a series of interconnecting dirt roads that would take us to the backcountry of ancestral Hopi lands. I always looked forward to when the truck would turn off the highway and we would begin the bumpy, dusty journey to the big waters of the reservoir. I would be piled in the camper with my cousins, and we would ride along playing games, occasionally looking out the window as the landscape passed by. Sometimes, off in the distance, we would see large stone cairns, many feet around and over 4 feet high. These cairns would be located on the top of small buttes or out on the broad valleys, and I always wondered what they stood for. At that early age, however, they were just another feature on the landscape on the journey to our real destination. It would be many years later, as a young archaeologist, working with my own Hopi people, that I would come to learn that these cairns held deep significance. I learned that they were trail markers, indicating the routes that ancestral Hopi people followed during their clan migrations. These routes were commemorated not only in Hopi memory, but also physically upon the landscape, and they marked our ancestral territories. Today, many of these cairns have been altered or even destroyed by newcomers to this region. Some also think they were built by later Spanish or American explorers, but that is not true. Hopi people know their true origins and meaning, and those that do remain stand as a testament to the long and complex history of Hopi, and they continue to connect us back into the lands of our ancestors, including that of Glen Canyon.
Every side canyon had running water. The glens of Glen Canyon stand for cottonwood glens that once lived here, canyon bottoms thick with them. Those are long gone, turned to standing skeletons that have been coming back up now that the reservoir is reaching historic lows. An ancient ecology is coming to light, and it's coming back to life. What we're seeing because of drought and lowering reservoir levels is the biggest restoration project in the country, and no one is lifting a finger to make it happen. It's progressing on its own. The drawback is that while Glen Canyon is beginning to restore itself, the water infrastructure that ecosystems and wildlife and millions of people depend upon is failing. In the 1970s, Lake Powell was filling up for the first time, and I was a kid living in Phoenix, 5-hour drive away from Powell. My dad and some friends got together and rented a houseboat and took me and some other kids out there. That was really my first time on the Colorado Plateau, the first time that I remember. I knew the Rocky Mountains from living there, and I knew southern Arizona and the Mogollon uplands, but I don't recall ever having seen the plateau until being on Powell. And my experience was naked sandstone that looked like it was Dr. Seuss made for a Roadrunner cartoon, and running around barefoot on it. I had never seen a place like that, or a place with that much water. I was an inland kid, and I didn't know at the time about dams and how that water got there. I just thought, this is a magical place. I've never seen anything like this. And I believe that's how a lot of people come to encounter the Colorado Plateau for the first time, going there recreationally to Lake Powell. That's not why it's here, though. It's not a recreational reservoir per se. It's really a piece of infrastructure rather than a swimming pool. It was put there to be a storage facility for Lake Mead downstream. So the water would be stored in Powell, and then it would be delivered down through the Grand Canyon to Lake Mead, and then dispersed to the lower basin states.
From a Hopi perspective, the Glen Canyon region is recognized as a vast landscape that safeguards monuments of Hopi culture and history. This is land of the ancestors, known in Hopi as Motisinum, the first people, and following them, the Hisatsinum, the people of long ago. These two concepts describe not only the cultural evolution of Hopi ancestry, but also acknowledge the longevity of their presence, spanning millennia back into time periods designated as Paleo and Archaic. Hopi ancestors were among the very first to experience this landscape and call it home. Who were these people, and where did they go? Hopi oral traditions recall that many ancestral clans comprised these groups. An ancient oral history from the Rattlesnake clan details the adventures of Tio, a young Hopi boy who journeyed down the San Juan and Colorado rivers in a cottonwood raft, centuries before John Wesley Powell claimed to be the first to do so. For generations they occupied this area, raising their families and marking their presence upon the landscape. We see traces of their lives within the archaeological record as artifacts, which includes ancestral villages, ceramics, stone tools, textiles, and burials of departed ones. Hopi people believe these are the metaphorical footprints of the ancestors, left behind as testimony of their time in the sculpted sandstone canyons and mesas. Eventually, the clans moved on, embarking on a series of migrations in search of their final destination. During these times, knowledge was accumulated. Medicine, technology, architecture, language, and ultimately, the development of agriculture. We believe this farming tradition, dedicated to the cultivation of corn and other crops, signals a cultural shift that led us on the path to becoming Hopi. Finally, after thousands of generations, the migrations are completed with the gathering of the clans at Dawanasavi, the center of the universe, the Hopi mesas of today.
When Lake Powell was at its recent low mark, it was at the same level as 1968, when the reservoir was just starting to come up for the first time. To get a look at this moment, I went out on a dory with a 4-horsepower electric motor, 4 miles per hour. We left from the Bullfrog Marina for a few nights to see landscapes that have been submerged for almost 60 years. The dangling rope marina was towed to shore and stranded, and decades of sunglasses, beer cans, and golf balls knocked off the decks of houseboats have been brought to daylight. What I was there to see were features of the old Glen Canyon, at least the tops of its cathedral spires and high gaping alcoves. A set of ancestral toeholds cut into a cliff rose from the water, aiming up to what had probably been a cliff dwelling or a granary, destroyed by boat wash and visitors who could poke into it with the nose of a speedboat. A natural bridge that hadn't been seen since about the time I was born was exposed enough that we could motor right through it and see reflections of sunlight off the water on the bridge's ceiling overhead. I've been writing articles on the science of Lake Powell and Glen Canyon for at least 20 years now, interviewing scientists, sedimentologists, biologists about what happens underneath the water and how long it would take for Lake Powell to turn back into an ecologically viable Glen Canyon. And for a while I was hearing that it would take decades, that the sediment load down there and the death rot at the bottom of these canyons, it's going to take a long time. But what we found at low water is that it happens relatively quick. It hardly takes months, sometimes just weeks. The flash floods come through there and move that sediment out and pitch it down deeper into Lake Powell. And what I saw was cottonwoods coming up and willows coming up, much more native plant activity than I had expected. Of course, there were Russian thistles, tumbleweeds growing, but for the most part, I was seeing native plants there. And so what we were thinking would take decades to restore actually happens almost in a snap. Life starts coming back to this place because Glen Canyon wants to live. It is this heartbeat that keeps beating underneath the water, and as soon as that water drops, it comes back to life. And you are aware of that heartbeat as you're walking through these canyons. You see that life returning rapidly. The next year I went back to Lake Powell after its low point, and I went back to some of the places where I had camped and traveled at low water. And that year we had had a heavy snowpack upstream, and the reservoir had come up by 60, 70 feet. So all of the places where we had camped were now down below us. And the arch we had gone under, the natural bridge where the reflections had shown up above us, when we got there, it was just a wall, and you could see where the top of the arch would be, but it was just underwater. And those canyons that were freshly emerged that had cottonwood trees growing, they were all drowned. The springs with the maidenhair ferns coming out of the cracks, all that was gone back down into the darkness.
In ancestral and historic times, springs drew people together, often being the place where villages were built, such as my home village of Paaqavi, or Reed Springs Place, located on Third Mesa. When a prolonged drought occurred across the Southwest in the late 12th century, many ancestral Hopi clans migrated to areas where more reliable springs could be found, including the southern Black Mesa area, where the Hopi villages are located. Hopi people maintain a strong connection with the natural waters found within Glen Canyon, as do many other indigenous tribes and people of the Southwest. Each of our respective cultures has learned the importance of respecting water and not to abuse it. Within Hopi culture, these teachings are encompassed by the phrase, "Paatuakatsi," water is life. Therefore, we continue to advocate for the protection and preservation of our ancestral landscapes, for there within is not only our history, but our future as well. What we do to water, we do to ourselves.
The problem is that we've got too much storage capacity and too little water. The river system that feeds Lake Powell is one of the most heavily developed in the world, with 15 dams on the Colorado River itself and hundreds more on tributaries. These all made sense last century when demand was much lower and snowpack was much higher. The idea was to store as much water as possible. Now we've got too many reservoirs and not enough water to keep them functioning. Too much glass, not enough martini. If you look at the design of Glen Canyon Dam, you'll see it was not engineered for low water. They never imagined this future of drought and overuse. Talk about optimism. They didn't put any sort of low water outlet on what was at the time the tallest concrete arch dam in the world. There's no way to safely release water if it goes below the penstocks. In 2023, it dropped to within 30 feet of those penstocks, and that's after dropping 100 feet that summer. That's how close the dam came to failing. The Colorado River would dry up, something it hasn't done even in geologic history. We were saved by a good winter the next year, lots of snow up high, rivers running muddy and big long into the summer. It was the kind of year you pray for, and one we haven't seen since then.
In modern times, Hopi people continue to visit the Glen Canyon area. We come as any visitor, wanting to see and explore these lands. Yet we also come to pay respects to our forebears. We know that below the waters of Lake Powell, there is a landscape that contains memories of Hopi history. I would like to see Glen Canyon restored to its former natural beauty, hallowed ground that is imbued with the spirits of ancestors who remain as stewards over a Hopi cultural landscape. Within the Glen Canyon landscape, there are still other monuments to the history of Hopi culture. These include ancestral villages and panels of petroglyphs and pictographs, which are literal rock writings. They are visual indicators, much like the modern-day emoji, that contain cultural metaphors that can be deciphered from within a Hopi cultural context. Many of them are now submerged beneath the waters of the reservoir. Some of them are probably forever lost, at least physically. But again, as Hopi people, we still maintain memories of our ancestors who once lived within Glen Canyon. One of these places still exists, keeping its head above the fluctuating waters. This place is an ancestral village, now known as Defiance House, which is located up a side canyon built within an arching alcove that faces the setting sun. It was given this name by archaeologist Dr. Bill Lipe, who led an archaeological survey of Glen Canyon in the 1950s. He and his crew were tasked with conducting salvage archaeology, which meant they were trying to locate and record as many archaeological sites as possible before the dam shut its gates and the waters began to backfill. However, he was not the first Anglo to visit and name this ancestral Hopi settlement. Years prior to Dr. Lipe's survey, this small village was known to early river runners who ventured deep into this territory, and they named it Three Warrior Ruin. They chose this name after seeing almost life-size pictographs painted in white pigment on an alcove wall above the site. This scene depicts individuals who appear to be engaged in battle, holding circular shields and wielding raised clubs in their hands. It is a mysterious yet telling story that fits within both archaeological and Hopi understandings of this time period. Most archaeologists agree that these pictographs were made during the late 12th century, during a time of uncertainty and strife within the region. For it was during this period that we know a prolonged drought of many decades had reduced the growing capacity of the area, resulting in tensions and small-scale warfare amongst the people as they struggled to survive. Oral histories from the Paiute, Ute, and Hopi tribes all speak of these difficulties. The world was out of balance. In 2011, a small group of Hopi men came to visit this ancestral site. However, they did not travel via the long trails from Hopi. Rather, they arrived via speedboats. They were accompanied by archaeologists from the National Park Service, and their purpose in coming to this area was to verify Hopi history. Among this group was my own father, himself a member of the Rattlesnake Clan, who claimed this region as part of their ancestral territory. Perhaps it was one of his ancestors who left the battle scene painted upon the sandstone tapestry. Over a decade later, I would make my own travels to this place as part of a Crow Canyon group. Our purpose was to explore the area, and like my father, we traveled via the glassy waters of the lake, navigating our rented pontoon boat up the narrow waterways. By the time of my visit, my father had passed into the spirit world, but I carried with me his journal that he kept during his own travels. In his writings, he pondered this history, but stated with confidence that he knew his people were here. I am grateful that I had the chance to follow in my father's footsteps, and it was pretty cool to see a place that he saw first. I can now add part of his story to my own.
I take every opportunity that I can to record the process of Lake Powell in its throes as this marginal historic level rises and falls. Rafting down Cataract Canyon, you see rapids coming back that haven't been run in decades. And as the Colorado River flows through the sediment left behind by Lake Powell, these mudbergs are exposed, and the river is dynamic, shifting course, looking for a channel. In the spring of 24, Lyle and I took a Crow Canyon group on a week-long Glen Canyon tour. For me, it was a chance to see another level, now 132 feet below its high mark. It was at its highest level in 3 years, and you can't help thinking about the cottonwoods that had started growing down there, the springs that had begun to peak out. What we've learned from falling reservoir levels is what's possible here. Given the chance, Glen Canyon will return on its own. The heart starts beating again, as if it had never stopped.
After my recent trips in, through, and around the reservoir, as well as some of the side canyons, I have a better understanding of this place and how it is connected to the surrounding landscapes. I've come to see how Glen Canyon is not merely another canyon system of the Colorado River. Rather, I view it as the heart of the Four Corners region. We just can't see it anymore, for its pulse is buried beneath the man-made waters of the reservoir. What lies submerged are the arteries and breathing holes of the earth, ribbons of water flowing through twisting tributaries, seeps and springs that emerge as prayers from the bedrock, shining with the blue-green light of life. The great confluence of the Colorado and San Juan rivers is now memorialized only by silent sandstone walls and in the stories of my ancestors. This landscape once connected distant regions, enabling passage through a harsh terrain of barren rock and distant horizons. The maze of canyons transporting you like subway tunnels, complete with adverts of rock writing left upon sandstone walls. I can only imagine what it was like to enter this heartland, traversing among vertical cliffs into secret spaces illuminated by dusty sun rays. Your only landmark being the shadowy dome of the Paaqavi, shifting and following your movements, a trusted yet mysterious companion that anchors your place in the universe. Down in the depths, the heart of Glen Canyon still pulses, as jet boats cut across still waters, and the spirits of my ancestors gaze up at the long hidden sun.
Wow. I want to thank Laura Brown for putting her heart into the making of this film. She was with us the entire travel seminar as we experienced it. She was taking pictures and film along the way, and she worked diligently to create a visual piece of art that supports Lyle and Craig's original narratives. We're really proud to have such a talented and thoughtful human on staff making these films for us. Thank you, Laura. I know I can speak for our whole team when I say that we love working with you, and we really appreciate the justice you can give to our experiences in the form of short film. Laura, would you like to say anything?
Yeah, I'll go ahead. Thank you so much, Adam. I really appreciate that. And I'm not going to take up too much time. I want to say thank you to everybody that has helped contribute to this film, and then a special big thank you to Craig and Lyle. I've worked with Craig and Lyle on a couple of films now and a couple of projects, and every time has just been absolutely wonderful. So thank you guys so much for letting me work with you again. And this project came together over the last couple of years, and it's definitely been a time when Glen Canyon in particular has been a bit of a hot topic in the news. It's always been a hot topic in general. The reservoir has always been a big deal. But it's really kind of picked up the last couple of years as we're watching the water situation continue to unravel and fluctuate. And as you guys probably know, water in the Southwest is a big deal. It is extremely prized. It's coveted. It's a big deal to all of us down here in the Southwest. So Glen Canyon is not only an unusual place, but it's got a lot of water, and it means a lot to a lot of people, and it has for a very, very long time. Many people and many cultures over time. So, and now we have generations of people that are coming to this place just in the last 60 to 70 years or so. And they have no idea what it is. They have no idea what it was before. They have no idea what it is underneath. They have no idea what was there, what's still there, and they have no idea what the future holds for this place. And none of us really do. We're all kind of trying to figure that out. So this is a very big topic. It's very complicated. It's very heated, and rightfully so. It's a big deal. So I'm going to hand this over to Lyle next, so I don't take up too much of your guys' time, but I just wanted to say thank you again to all the viewers out there as well. I really, really hope that you enjoyed the film. It's been an absolute pleasure to make. And I'll hand it off to you, Lyle. Thank you for joining us today, everybody.
All right. Thank you, Laura. Hopefully you can all hear me okay. I'm coming to you through Res Wi-Fi, so we'll make the best of it and see where it takes us today. But real quick thank you to the team, and of course to you all who have showed up to participate in the webinar. I really appreciate everybody taking the time and effort out of your day to join us. And this has been, yeah, like Laura said, and Adam, really fun, interesting, challenging journey that we have been on for the past couple years in figuring out the logistics of how to get around in and around the reservoir itself. But then what do we do with all of that experience? And so I'm just really grateful that everybody is very thoughtful in this endeavor. And so it's always something in which I feel that it's very much a team effort, and hopefully that carries through in the message that we put out there. I want to share a couple slides here and kind of contrast what you saw in the film. What I presented in the film is, kind of really descriptive, heartfelt language that I use to express those connections that Hopi people have, not just with Glen Canyon, but landscapes across the Southwest and even beyond. And so it presents one perspective of those connections. But I want to contrast that kind of perspective with some real realities that Hopi is facing when it comes to water scarcity, water access, and the future, because it also brings into play that cultural history that I talked about within the film itself. So bear with me. I'm going to stop my video here and try and get this one. All right, there we go. So again, this is a real time thing that's happening right now. And so I'm going to focus on current legislation that is attempting to make its way through our administration right now. And so it's titled the Northeastern Arizona Indian Water Rights Settlement Agreement. And if you want to know more about this issue, like Laura said, it's very complicated. It's complex. There's so much history and information out there that if you want a good place to start, I would start with this document right here, which is put out by the Kyle Center for Water Policy at Arizona State University. And so they've put together like a 4 or 5 page handout that really outlines what is at stake and what is being proposed as a part of this settlement agreement. So a lot of the information that I'm going to talk about focuses or comes directly from this agreement, as well as from some tribal statements. And so again, if you're looking to go down the rabbit hole, this is a good place to start. So what this agreement does is it's attempting to settle decades of litigation that has been ongoing between the Navajo Nation, the Hopi tribe, the federal government, state governments, community governments, all concerning who gets what from the limited water resources that we have here in the Southwest. And so this agreement was originally proposed and introduced into the legislative process last year during the last administration. However, it did not make the deadline, and so it was effectively killed during that administrative process. From what I understand, it's since been reintroduced in March of this year, and I really don't know where it stands right now. There's so many things in flux right now that it's kind of hard to follow exactly the progress of this. And I'm only going to focus in the Hopi, what is proposed for the Hopi tribe, and you can read along with me. I'm just going to read from this to kind of stated the script. From the upper basin, Hopi is slated to get 2,300 acre feet per year. And for those that don't know what an acre foot is, it's about the amount of water that takes to fill an acre to a depth of 1 foot. And it's approximately 365,000 gallons is what compromises an acre foot. And so there's 2 segments of water, one from the upper basin, one from the lower basin. And I'm assuming that these numbers are being derived from the current allocation numbers that exist right now. So keep that in mind in terms of where this water is coming from and who's going to actually have to give it up. It also resolves, underlying or claims to the aquifers that we sit atop of. And so here at Hopi, we're really fortunate to have aquifers still existing subsurfacely here. They're very deep. They require infrastructure to get to, but at least there's some legislation being put forth which recognizes Hopi's right to access and utilize these aquifers. The agreement also establishes a process for which the Hopi and Navajo tribes can work out an intertribal agreement for the 5 shared washes that crosses our land. That's going to be a very interesting process, I believe, once we get to that point. If anybody really knows the history between Hopi and Navajo tribes, it's been very contentious. And so this is just another layer to that history, and we'll see how it plays out. The agreement itself has a $5 billion price tag, and so it's probably $3 billion more than the largest water settlement that's ever been awarded to tribal nations. Where this money is, if it actually exists, again, is still kind of an unknown there. But out of that $5 billion payment, Hopi is slated to get about $500,000 to help us continue developing infrastructure here on the reservation, but also help us access other water resources. And out of that 5 billion, approximately 2 billion is being geared or set aside to help develop a pipeline, which would come from the reservoir and would serve both Navajo and Hopi communities. That project has raised some various specific questions for us here at Hopi in terms of who actually controls that pipeline, given that once it leaves the reservoir, it crosses Navajo Nation land. So again, there's a lot of intertribal agreements that I think the government has kind of passed along to us to figure out. And so when and if we get to that point, we'll see how it goes. But ultimately, in the original legislation, the pipeline was scheduled to be completed by 2040, which is, 15 years out from now. The legislative process for this to get passed is very long and very lengthy. And there are numerous opportunities along the way for objections to be raised. And so there's no real idea in terms of how long it could potentially take for this agreement to be finally agreed upon and finalized. And so in the meantime, Hopi is still in water limbo, so to speak, and we're waiting to see how this all plays out. But again, there are some real cultural issues or cultural questions that are raised here at Hopi when it comes to that cultural history that I talked about within the movie. You know, that's a big part of who we are. Those stewardship values are derived out of that cultural history. And so that's really the foundation of Hopi culture in terms of guiding us into the future. And so in thinking about how we relate to the Glen Canyon landscape and what we recognize as being culturally important, this project, particularly the pipeline, stands in contrast to our stewardship values, and it creates a lot of conflict for that decision-making process. You know, one question I have is, okay, if by Hopi agreeing to this settlement, are we now tied to the reservoir? Do we now have to advocate for the continued existence of the dam and therefore the reservoir? And so that creates a lot of cultural conflict for us, again, given the cultural history that we're trying to protect within that landscape. As I've been reading all of this legislative documentation and other sources of information, it appears that there's an assumption that the dam and the reservoir will always be there or will be there for a much longer time period than we all know is the reality. And so in some respects, it appears that, or it seems like the same planning mindset that was used to establish the original compact agreement in terms of their over-optimistic outlook on the water availability, that same framework is still kind of being followed. And there's no real clear commitment from the government to the tribes about how long this process is going to take, but also how long this access to that water will be available. And so as the dam nears its end of its lifespan, then what? At the core of this, again, this is not new for Hopi and many of the other tribes in terms of the conflicts we face in terms of trying to do the right thing, living up to our stewardship values, but also trying to provide for the future, you know, of our communities and our populations. And so oftentimes it feels as if Hopi and other tribes were forced into the position of having to chip away and sell away parts of our cultural foundation for a future that is very much uncertain. And so, you know, this places in a very difficult position of having to agree to some of these things without really having a true sense of how it's going to play out. When I'm on some of these trips, I ask my participants this specific question at the end: how much more do the tribes have to give? And I'm asking that question not just in reference to the Glen Canyon issue, but I'm referencing that into the Southwest, the North American continent, worldwide in general, because at least here in the Southwest, we know that the tribes have given much to the quote unquote development of this country through our uranium, through our water, through our coal, methane gas. And so much has been taken from indigenous lands to support this country. I think here at Hopi, we also recognize that we're part of the issue here, you know, that my accessing you through this technology, I have to acknowledge that I'm a participant in this process as well, both the consumption, but also the conservation part of it. So one thing that's from here at Hopi that I think that we always recognize is that despite our participation in the larger issue, we still hold on to our stewardship values, and therefore we still continue to do our part in terms of encouraging sustainable use of our land, water, air, all the things that make up this planet that we inhabit now. And we continue to offer our traditional values as a model of sustainability. However, you know, oftentimes that input isn't fully implemented or taken very seriously, and so we're stuck with kind of this never-ending cycle of the tribes having to give up more, but receiving less and less over time. Again, this issue is really complicated, so I didn't want to get too far, you know, into it because again, there's a lot of information out there. I have one more slide, and it's finishing with a quote from our vice chairman, and it's his official statement in regards to this agreement. At the end of his quote, he states, "Hopi cannot do this alone. And I think that's a reflection of, again, not only our participation in this process, but also, again, that we need others that are out there to look at Hopi and other Indigenous ways as the model for how sustainability should be followed and implemented into the future. I'll go ahead and switch to the next slide. All right, back to you, Adam.
Thank you, Lyle. Like I said, always giving us something important to think about. I really appreciate that. Craig, do you have any thoughts?
Yeah, let me add to that. Thank you, Lyle. It's always good to hear your voice recorded, but especially live. uh, and I think that a lot of people, especially in the Colorado River drainage, 400 million people or 40 million people who are who are engaging with the water of the Colorado, I think a lot of them just feel like this system just there's an infrastructure, there are rivers flowing, things are working. But as Lyle pointed out there, that there's a lot that's not working, and that there's a lot that's changing. Not just the amount of water that we have and how we're doing it, but the way we look at water. Different organizations like Las Vegas is working. I think doing a better job than a lot of the other cities in the Southwest of managing its water. But then you look at it and go, well, how do we even do this? How does Las Vegas exist? How do these cities we have exist? Um, how does this thing work? And this idea that, oh, it just flows along and we've got these reservoirs and rivers and everything is going to work out fine. It's not it this takes some incredible effort, legislative effort, but also uh my effort in this is when I write, I try to give a sense of the importance of water, or the experience of water. And and uh and I often avoid the bigger questions because I'm trying the bigger questions of how does the infrastructure work? Where is it succeeding? Where is it failing? Because I'm writing more about the maidenhair ferns and the sense of being on the water, mostly because I don't want us to forget, what Lyle expressed of what we do to water, we do to ourselves, that there is a relationship. It's not necessarily just about the big rivers and the big reservoirs. It's about how we relate to water, the sacredness of water. Um, but then I do pay attention to these larger issues. Just last month, I was at a conference in Boulder, Colorado, of a lot of the movers and shakers for the Colorado River, for infrastructure. And it was a hot um, conference because there's a lot at stake right now, and I wanted to just convey a little bit of it. This conference it's of water lawyers and government people and tribes. There was a heavy tribal presence there, which was really important. It was all tribes from the Quetzan in the down toward the Delta, up through Hopi, Ute. It was really powerful to see a panel of 10 tribal representatives talking to this group of infrastructure people, policymakers, negotiators, and everybody's in this, and everybody is trying to figure out how it's going to work. And the reason this was such a hot conference is that in 2026, several major agreements and guidelines governing the operation and the management of the Colorado River are set to expire. And this includes drought contingency plans and international agreements. And the Colorado River, it provides water, like I said, to 40 million people, and the 7 states that are involved in this have until October 1st, 2026 to come up with a single agreed upon plan for how the whole Colorado River is going to be managed. And this has never happened before. And if they don't come up with a plan by then, the management rules for the entire river go back to the 1970s. They default to a time when the river system had a lot more water in it, and mistakes were made that we're still dealing with. Mistakes like Glen Canyon Dam being built without a drought contingency. And so this conference is happening in that atmosphere, where meanwhile the current administration budget for 2026 cuts federal funds for water infrastructure for the states by 89%. So that's a budget of $2.76 billion that will be cut by $2.46 billion. Not much is left. So the states were told to find, quote, alternative funding sources for their water infrastructure. So you can see why it was a hot conference, because there's a lot going on right now, and I was wandering around taking notes of I was just getting people's quotes, little snippets of what was being said to see if I could capture the atmosphere of what was going on there. I was the keynote speaker for this conference, along with Patty Limerick, who is just an amazing fireball with her knowledge and contacts for the Colorado River. And so while she went off and talked to the movers and shakers, I just roamed through and picked up these quotes, which I'd like to share with you. Just some of them to give a sense of what the people who are making major decisions about the waterway are feeling. And I just picked up little snippets. In the absence of negotiation, we all lose. We've got an asteroid coming at us. We should look up. We are out of time for denial and anger. Wake up and smell the aridification. We are nervously watching. And this is just, I'm just listening and picking up the words that come out. Scott Cameron, the Assistant Secretary of the Interior for Water and Science, came to give a talk, which was brave of him. This was not a friendly audience to the Department of the Interior, and there were a lot of movers and shakers who didn't show up, notably to this conference, because of not wanting to be having to answer questions. And so Scott Cameron stood up and answered some questions, and he said, "Are we hopeful? Are we confident? We are hopefully confident, and it is not done until we have a deal. In the absence of a 7-state deal, this goes back to us," which means if the states don't come up with a plan, he said the Secretary of Interior is going to take over the Colorado River as a water master. And so it'll be thrown to the federal government. And I believe him when he said the Secretary does not want this. The Department of Interior doesn't want this. They don't want to take over. This is a messy situation. And so the states have to come up with it. And I wrote down quotes from a woman who's a negotiator for Nevada. And she got up and gave a talk where she was just coming out of a divorce, and she equated what was going on right now with her divorce. And she was saying the lower basin states and the upper basin states need to divorce. this needs to start all over again. We need to go back to scratch. And she said, Nevada lives or dies based on the ability for the other 6 states to get their shit together. And of this kind of collaboration, she said, we've done a really crappy job of it, everybody in this room. And that's the feeling, is that it is a mess and it's about to hit a major changing point. And that's going to affect Glen Canyon, Lake Mead. It's going to affect a lot with budget cuts and with laws that are set to expire next year. So it's an exciting time to be in the Southwest. But I would say that it's always been an exciting time because water has always been such an issue. And that is why I write the way I do, where I am trying to say, at its foundation, there's a sacredness to water. That there's all this mess of dams and infrastructure going on all around it, but make sure you look deep into it and taste this water, put it on your lips, know that it is actually something real. And that's what I was at this conference to. That's what I was giving a talk for, is to say, remember why you're doing this, that it's not just about policy, that the it's about rain and the importance of rain. So I really appreciate Crow Canyon, you, Laura, having me to join you on this film, and Lyle, such an honor to be with you again.
Well said, sir. It takes me back to something Lyle said in the film is what we what we do to water, we do to ourselves. Makes you think. I have there's some really great questions in the Q&A. I want to I think we have time to get to at least two. Number one, this came out of Lyle's presentation, so I'd like to give Lyle the first chance at this one. You mentioned in your slide that the lifespan of Glen Canyon is coming to a close. Can you explain more about that and maybe explain what is threatening its demise?
Yeah, I'm not an engineer, so take that into account with my limited understanding. Again, a lot of this information is out there, but from what I understand, again, is that this dam was never intended to last perhaps more than 100 years, is some of the years that I've heard associated with it, and so that's maybe 20, 30 years out, somewhere around that number. But more importantly, there's sediment buildup occurring behind the dam right now, and so that may be limiting its lifespan as we speak right now. And so I don't know what the contingency plans are, to dredge the sediment fill the load out behind the dam, to do some other kind of reconstruction to allow the lower water levels to flow through the dam. Craig probably might have some better insight into this, but as far as I know, yes, is that the dam was never meant to be there permanently, nor was it meant to continue to serve what it does now forever. And so at some point, that infrastructure will become obsolete. And when the reservoir goes away, then what? In terms of the pipeline, do we just keep lengthening those drinking straws further and further down? Will there be funding available to do that project work? Will there even be water to get to the tribal communities? And so just a lot of questions in terms of associated with the lifespan of the dam, but a lot of environmental, but in structural issues as well associated with the dam itself that are, all kind of coming to a head right now. And so, again, I would, yeah, pass this off to Craig. I'm sure he has a little bit better explanation, but from my general perspective, that's what I know.
Yeah, like Lyle said, it's well, it's a mess. I think it's supposed to last how long? a century, 20 years ago, I was interviewing, or 15 years ago, I was interviewing sedimentologists about the sediment load. And they were saying, you know what, Lake Powell might have another 700 years because the sediment is stopping up high. It's not going all the way down to the dam. And so they're losing upper real estate on the reservoir, but they're not losing most of it. But the water was higher then, and that was they were just using one data set, the what sediment is coming into the reservoir and where is it dropping, and didn't account for the situation we're in now with the water dropping drastically. And that all that sediment being pushed down farther and farther until you have this mass that's heading for the dam. And so you're not only losing surface water, you're losing dam reservoir space. And I feel like the contingency plan is really, let's hope for a really good snowpack. uh, the contingency plan is hope. I mean, there are other possibilities out there that they're looking at bypassing going below the penstocks, and what would it take to put another tunnel through the dam down lower to let the water keep going. And some engineers that I've talked with have said, well, yes, that could happen, but how many holes can you put in this dam? It wasn't designed for that. It was the releases now, the overflow releases aren't meant to handle that kind of a continuous flow. It's not built for that. It's built for hydroelectricity. And so I think that's, when Lyle says it's coming to the end of its life, in a way, I think he's right. And in a way, I don't want Lake Powell to come to the end of its life, because if it somehow survived, that would mean we'd have years and years of great snowpack, and we wouldn't be using all the water. And there's this utopian future of, if you like Lake Powell, of that still being there. And that means we have to the climate has to go the other way, or our water use has to go the other way. That's the only way that we aren't at the end of Lake Powell and Glen Canyon Dam's life. But with everything that's happening, Lyle's absolutely right. We're seeing the reservoir at the end of its life. Maybe 10 years, maybe 20, maybe 30, but just a few years ago, it looked like it was just about over. Two bad snowpacks, no years of low snow, maybe 3. I'd say that dam is shot.
Damn. Is there real quick? Someone asked about Bill Leip's work in that area. Is there a book or any publications that we know exist about Bill Leip and others' work in Glen Canyon before it was flooded?
There are a number of articles, and I can't remember. There's a few autobiographies out there of not just Bill, but other crew members that were a part of that crew and did work out there. So yeah, fortunately, I don't have it right off the top of my head. I was fortunate to be able to converse with Bill before he passed away earlier this year, and so a lot of that information in terms of what that I talked about at Defiance House came from him. In terms of the history of his presence there, but also who was there before him. So yeah, just I would say Google Bill Leip, Glen Canyon. There's some really cool videos out there as well, taken by river runners, but other folks that were recognizing what was significant in the Glen Canyon and taking the opportunities to go out and videotape and record, photograph a lot of that stuff that's now below water. And so um, there's plenty of information out there about Bill Leip and his work.
Thank you, Lyle. And one last questions for us. Is there anyone studying or surveying / monitoring the lands exposed at low water? Any organizations or people that we know of that are studying this landscape as it emerges, reemerges?
Yeah, Glen Canyon Institute, Returning Rapids which is an outfit looking at up at the upper end of Lake Powell, and where Cataract Canyon comes in. I'm sure there are a lot more than that, but I know that there are organizations who are keeping an eye on what's going on. And Lyle, you might have more on who's going out there, because I know a lot of people are out there, a lot of researchers. I don't know what kind of concerted effort, but Glen Canyon Institute and Returning Rapids are two.
I think just to real quick on that, yeah, there are a lot of work being done. I would encourage those organizations or any organizations to remember that there's more than just one Indigenous community out here that has connections to Glen Canyon. I think a lot of times we tend to focus on one tribal nation or community and think that they represent all tribal communities' perspectives. And so it would be real good for those organizations to reach out to other tribal communities and bring them into their research and work that they have ongoing.
If I can add just one thing to that was a quote that I picked up at the conference that's up here in the corner that one of the lawyers for one of the tribes on the lower stretch of the Colorado said, if you know one tribe, you know one tribe. And that was that was his, because a lot of the conversation was how different each tribal affiliation is with the river, with what water rights they have, what water rights they have that aren't allocated, and how they're working. It was, that was really interesting part of the conference was hearing from different tribal members, and they're entirely different stories, because they're different people, different communities, and they are all based on this one river.
I want to thank you, Lyle and Craig, for your insights, all this really in-depth, important information and things to think about. Thank you, Laura, for creating the film. Thank you, everyone involved. Thank you, Crow Canyon, for holding this space and making this conversation possible. Thanks to all our participants for joining. This has been a really good one, and we appreciate you. Consider joining us in the fall if it works for you. Otherwise, we'll see you on the next webinar, and however way you can interact with us. We appreciate it. Take care.
Thanks, everyone.